Okay, on camera we see Bob St. John. I'm Calvin Castine. I'm off camera here because I'm going to be the prop man too here. We're in the old train station in Rouses Point, which is now a museum. Is there an official name for this museum, Robert?
This is the Rouses Point History and Welcome Center.
History and Welcome Center. And how often do they welcome people? Is it got any hours that it's open?
We, up until last year with the pandemic, we normally would open during museum days in June, and then we would actually close at the end of August, maybe, just before Labor Day. We used to be open 3 days a week, then it got where we had a hard time getting volunteers or whatever, so the last time that we were actually, before the pandemic, it was just Saturdays from 10 until 4. So
we're doing this on August 17th, 2021. So we're not quite out of this pandemic yet, so hopefully in 2022 we'll be able to get back to some
right. We didn't open again this year because of the pandemic, and also because of the work that's being done outside on the ramp there for I believe that's being done through Amtrak and that.
Okay. Of course, they're right a mile from the or less from the Canadian border. There's not much need for Amtrak right now.
No,
nobody's crossing the border.
No.
Hopefully that'll
the only thing coming through now is just freight back and forth. Right. That's it.
Thank God for that.
No.
All right, so some activity on Facebook. People asking about the old spur that ran across on the lake from, I'd say probably from somewhere what we call the state dock area. People familiar with Rouses Point?
Mm-hmm.
Didn't come from the state dock, but in that area
Right.
on Montgomery Street, and ran down to almost Champlain Street, across from Capitano right now.
Right.
Area there.
Yep.
Or Stewart's. So I'm going to hold up this this picture. I'm going to hold it sideways. That's a better way to show what's here. I'm going to point to my pen here. So this is the actual railroad spur that it came down. This is in the lake. This is Lake Street right here along the lake, and right here when it makes the turn, that's where Chapman comes down, and this little spur here, this little street here that went down to Montgomery from Lake is no longer there. And in fact, by the 1869 map, this is from an 1856 map. By 1869, that street was gone too. So this is Lake Street. This is that railroad line that went down and across. It almost got to the Saxon area, but not quite. And just before you got to Champlain Street, all this here was happening. So we do have a closer view of that, but not a particularly good one. Unfortunately, we were unable to get our hands on a computer today at this location to give you a computer's view, because this stuff is all available on the internet. But looking at it from Lake Street, this is how it would have looked. This here, this little Y or V right here, Benny Arnold was just here, and Benny said that went to an area in became Montpelier's cabins, and that's where they trains would be turning around in there. And
Yep.
so that was there in the lake, and Bob's got a picture of an aerial picture, a recent one.
2013.
2013.
That
Well,
was.
in my scheme of things, that's not too far away. So hopefully our camera's picking it up. You can just barely see those little brown areas there in the water off the shore. And what would those be, Bob? What would it be?
That was the cribbing for to be able to, for your supports to come up onto the support the rails, the trestle.
Yeah, don't confuse this with the stuff we still see in the old Rutland crossing, the bridge that's out in the back of runs parallel to the current bridge here.
Right.
That stuff is sticking out of the water. Don't confuse this with that. This is entirely different. Again, it ran north-south from an area from Montgomery Street down to almost Champlain Street. And it was built by, who do you think it was built by, Bob?
Well, according to the information from Henry Van Acker, who did research on it, he is stating in his research that it was built by a John Rudolphus Booth,
Okay.
who had the lumber yard, had the
SBB Lumberyard. You can't quite make it out here. Where's the 1869? There's the 1869
Right.
one. This will show us here. This is the 1869 map. This is Lake Street again running down and continuing up here, and this is where that sidewalk area was, and is now gone. And I can't say a sidewalk, there's a street that actually connected Lake to the corner of Montgomery by the state dock area. That's gone by 1869, so from 1856 to 1869 wasn't a lot of time. This is where that SBB lumberyard is, and that lumberyard was the one that used that train track, which is gone here by 1869. But they're the ones that built it, according to Bob's information here from the late Henry Van Acker. Henry got very much involved in this, did a real study on this, didn't
Yes, he did. Yes.
I know Henry stopped in, I told him I had an 1869 map, and this was before it became available on the internet. And we looked at it, and he saw that train coming down there, and he was really impressed. So it must have really sparked something in him, and he got going, and he did a heck of a
Right.
job, a lot of research. And I guess there's a few of you in town who have copies of this.
Mhm.
And you got your copy from.
I received it was a while ago, and I believe we received it from Al Kaufman.
Alan Kaufman,
He was a real good friend of Henry's.
also known as Hector.
So, yes.
The third, is it the
Third. The third. No.
So, go ahead.
So anyway, and then of course that with the lumber yard that was there, this is the picture of, you got the Chapman building there, Chapman block, and all that whole lakefront was just full of lumber from that, and from John Rudolphus Booth. He had a big lumber business in Canada, and they would bring all the lumber and everything down from his big lumber mill process in Canada.
Now, that building there, the Chapman building's not there anymore, right?
Right,
That's
that's
on the
that
corner of Chapman Street.
Chapman and Lake Street, yes, yep.
So just to see where you're looking at, that building on the corner, was on the corner of Chapman and Lake Street, if you're familiar with Rouses Point.
And he actually, when it says the, I remember, see right here.
Feel free
With
to read
the-
all of his words if you want.
The biography of John Rudolph Booth's, what Henry did was he stated that the material herein is neither intended to be a biography nor a history of his railroad. He had the Canada and Atlantic Railway, and that's the information that is here. And it was from, this is dates 1897 and 1947. Location was Ontario, Quebec, and into Vermont. His, it was belonging existence to John Rudolphus Booth, was an Ottawa-based lumber baron who in the later half of the 19th century amassed timber rights approaching 7,000 square miles in central and northern Ontario.
Wow.
So, and he had a lumber mill, but part of the problem was is that they couldn't ship it out the lumber not fast enough. And so eventually what happened was it just went out of business because they
Well,
couldn't supply the
people
lumber
that-
fast enough to,
Yeah, too
you
much
know,
business, so they
too
went
much
out of business.
Yeah. So, but according to Henry's research in that this cribbing and this spur or whatever was to help support his lumber business out of Canada, and with the docks, and as you saw on there, with the amount of lumber that was there along, they needed to offload it or whatever off the canal boats, everything that came down, and also on the railroad to put it onto the shore.
So as far as we know, he is no relation to John Wilkes Booth.
No, none that I'm aware of.
Names are similar, but
Right,
that's probably why he all threw in his middle name so that people would know.
right, not to confuse the two. Oh, but anyway, he even got a diver, and I believe it was Billy Aubrey Jr., I'm not sure.
That's Henry Van Acker we're talking about right now.
Right, well, I went and got a diver to be able to go down,
And there's a,
and he did a DVD, CD of the dive, and also reiterated that he had aerial photos done of the
so this was
the
done
cribbing.
by Henry Van Acker.
Yes,
So
Yep.
this was done because of his interest in this. And,
Right.
And, with the lake so low this year in 2021, probably as good a view as you're ever going to get would probably be this year.
yes,
Because
yeah, as low as, like you said,
This
as
was
low as,
done in, say,
right.
2014, you think? Or so? Or
2013, I think, is when he, right. Aerial photos taken around 2013, showing the spur area and the color of the stone of the crib. Nope. No.
All right, so this will give you another view here. We can, not sure if my camera will pick it up, but there's some sailboats, and here's some of that cribbing here. We can, the lighting went up. Quite sure if we're picking it up. This will give you a view here. Here is the former Saxony. Here's the Stuarts. This was before Casa Capitano came in, but that's Casa Capitano restaurant is. So it came down into this area, and this is where this area here is where the Montpelier cabins were. So that's where the track crossed, and
Where the Y was put in, so.
so that's the area we're referring to here. So we're kind of going on whatever pops into our head at a particular time. We have we've already had a couple of tours. We have a couple more stopping in, so let Bob get over there and take care of that. We are back. Bob's going to read the notes that Henry wrote, but it really has me confused because of the angle of where the spur comes down. It doesn't look like the angle of what we know currently know as the state dock. I think the state dock goes out more in a east-west direction. This shows it kind of pointing toward this area here. Read what Henry's notes say about that.
Says that, and this is from drawings by A. Kingsley, published by O.J. Lamb, Philadelphia, 1856.
Which is right here. This is the 1856 map.
Yep, a complete copy of the map is on exhibit at the Clinton County Historical Museum. It says the spur, the northern terminus thereof, which is, as of the date hereof, commonly referred to as the state dock. The easterly end thereof, which abuts the east side of Montgomery Street in the village of Rouses Point, New York.
So I don't see that angle in the current state dock. It's kind of underwater right now. But
Right. And it also states that an area north of the state dock, noting the customs house and depot.
the customs house is no longer at this location. The depot years ago referred to as Depot Dock, and the Depot Dock is now known as the Sportsman's Pier.
Right, so there's the customs was there at the, what we call the Sportsman's Pier, but in that era of the 1850s, 1860s, and so on, there was a thing called the Steamboat Hotel there, which we have a picture of here.
Yep.
And the train would actually come in under that building, and people come in on steamboats, and passengers and would get there, stay in that steamboat. And from talking with Peg Barcombe years ago, she said that the report she had was that the steam train running underneath.
Yeah,
it wasn't a very pleasant stay.
No, the noise plus the smoke and steam or whatever. So yeah.
So it didn't last that long, but right now that's at the end of the current Rouses Point Sportsman's Club Pier, is what you see there in that building on the right side of the screen. But as you can see in this artist's drawing here, there's all kinds of activity down heading in the other direction there. But boating and canal boats and steamboats were all part of the history of Rouses Point, and not just the trains. Anything else, Bob, that Henry wrote?
Then he goes on to describe the other end of where the cribs appear in the pictures,
Right.
or whatever. That appears there may be 2 or 3 cribs located approximately 1,500 feet south of said outcropping, the purpose of which is uncertain. The impression first given was that there was a loop at the south end of the spur on the west side of Lake Street, but it now appears that was such not the case. Rather, it seems that there are in fact 2 curved loops at the south end, one curving to the north and the other to the south, which served as a turnaround, which is described as a Y, I believe.
Yep, and you've I won't show this too long because I'm not sure who drew it, but what you'd do is you'd back your train up or drive it up one way, go the other way, and then head out this way, and then keep going around so you got it headed back the right direction.
Right. And it says it is interesting to note that the Beers Atlas of 1869 shows nothing of the spur. Only docks and wharves on the lakeshore located on the north by a point east of where Montgomery Street begins, a curve to the north, and on the south by a point east of an unnamed street, on the date hereof being White Street, whereas Lamb's map of 1859 displays the spur but not the docks and wharves. A second speculation that he made was that the spur may have been abandoned before the construction of the docks and wharves.
Apparently, so it's a very brief period. We're talking 1856 map, and it's there, active, and by 1869 it's all history. And of course, in that era too, this area that we're sitting in right now was briefly known as Hoyleton.
Yes.
This was Hoyleton, and there were 2 post offices, one here and one what we call the Upper Village, up by the Saxony, by the Stewarts,
Right.
where Champlain Street comes in. That's the Upper Village. This was the Lower Village. So people would have to go to both post offices to see if they got something. So in the 1850s, there's letters in the old newspapers of people complaining about it. And the post office decided, all right, we'll have just one post office. They put it downtown in the Lower Village and called it Rouses Point.
Yeah.
So Hoyleton disappeared. I have been able to find online an old postage thing that with a postmark for Hoyletown, but the price is $100, and I don't think Judy would allow me to spend $100 on a postmark. But it does show that Hoyleton was right here, and So,
Yeah, and then they had the postal in the Chapman block, was the
yeah.
post
that-
office
Yeah, they ended up there,
in downtown. Right,
so.
yep.
So the upper people in the upper village, those were the rich people. And down here were the railroad tracks, it must have been the
And the
commoners.
wharfs and the
Yeah.
canal boats and all that stuff that was,
The laborers
you
were
know,
down
as we
here.
now call the working class or whatever.
Well, those upper village guys didn't want to,
And that's where all your more expensive homes and everything were in the,
Right.
the upper,
Upper village, right.
upper village.
'cause they had
and that-
money.
Right. So, but yeah, so I mean, it's, when you talk about with Henry's research or whatever, and then they, you know, other research of you know, where in called the Champlain and St. Lawrence Railroad, built in 1850, runs from Rouses Point to the Province line, which was the Canadian Province line, runs about a mile in length. And it was originally built to the upper village, but that portion has long since abandoned. And this was from a copy of page 8 of A New Geography and History of Clinton County, New York, published in 1885 by H.K. Averill Jr., civil engineer, Plattsburgh, New York, 1885.
Gabriel put that out, and that's what Bob's referring to here, where he's talking about the railroads. At the time that spur was built, that ran, we'll call it from the state dock to the Saxony, just to give it some reference points, but it didn't get to the Saxony. There was no railroad from Rouses Point going into Canada.
Right.
The D&H hadn't come through yet.
Right.
So when that was active, so this Lake Champlain or Champlain and St. Lawrence, I don't know why they took the St. Lawrence name, because they're a long way from the St. Lawrence Seaway here, the St. Lawrence River, but they called it the Champlain and St. Lawrence, and it apparently was just that 1 mile spur.
Right.
It ran north-south.
Yep.
Then when the D&H came through, D&H originally went into Canada through Moore's Junction, which was Moore's Forks. Well, actually Moore's, not Moore's Forks, but Moore's, and that's very much where Larry Marnes' little Rutland station is there, and that's the area that is long gone too.
Yeah. The on this, the history of Champlain, New York, from the Gazetteer and Business Directory of Franklin and Clinton counties for 1862-1863, published by Hamilton Child, Augsburg, New York. It states that, let me see here. The Champlain and St. Lawrence Railroad Company, Canadian, erected at great expense a pile bridge of a mile in length between the lower and upper village, and at the latter place built in a large and expensive depot and wharves. But the experiment proved a failure, for the greater share of the carrying trade tended towards the ORR depot. After a short time, their improvements were abandoned, and they now occupy the ORR depot, which was
Augsburg
the
Railroad.
Augsburg Railroad.
Right.
So,
When the now non-existent Rutland first came in, it was the Northern Railroad, sometime around 1849, 1850. Then for a while it was the Augsburg, Lake Champlain, and it may even have had another name or two in between there before the Rutland took over. But the Rutland closed roughly in the era of 1960 on this side of the
right.
side of the pond. And,
Once-
unfortunate, but so that rooftop highway that's often talked about, the run from the Augsburg to Vermont. We had one. We had one
right.
in the 1850s.
Yep.
It's just called the railroad.
Yep. So,
Anything else, Bob, that we should look at this point?
I
I'm
don't.
gonna come back here as soon as he can get motivated enough to sit down with me again with Ben Arnold, because Benny showed up with a big pile of pictures.
Yes.
And I think Bob was drooling when he saw some of those.
Yeah. some of the businesses and places here in the village that, you know, want to work on a project to do that. So increase our awareness here for people in the village of just exactly, you know, how much businesses, the names and everything that were here since the late 1780s, 90s, right up through. So that's what
That's your next project.
next project that I'm working on. So, yep,
I think he's got a lot of pictures that you're gonna,
I think so too.
Confiscate.
I didn't know that he had when he was showing us the book with the pictures. So we'll make copies and then see about with the list of the businesses and putting it on display here, you know, for the people of the village.
okay.
And
Anything
anybody
else
will
that Henry
stop in.
had in his journal here that we should point out?
I can't think of anything that that he had in here that was, especially as far as relating to the, you know, that spur and any of the questions that some people had of, you know, what it was. So,
All right, well, we want to thank Bob St. John for getting a hold of us and doing this brief segment. It turned out to be a much longer segment than we anticipated because we had, even though
Visitors.
the museum is closed, we've had 2 sets of visitors here that have come in, and
had to stop and,
Bob's too polite to say, we're closed.
yeah. Well, when you're dealing with history, it's hard to,
Yeah, you get people that are interested, you
right.
want to do it. So,
Yep.
okay, so that's going to wrap it up here, August 17th, 2021. And again, our thanks to Bob St. John for giving us this little brief history, and our thanks to the late Henry Van Acker
Yes, for
his
his
interest
research
that
and interest,
that made
yes,
all this possible.
right.
Thanks, Bob.
You're welcome.